Sky Howdy, and welcome back to another exciting, awesome, amazing, and incredible episode of World Bigfoot Radio. And before we get right into the show, which we are going to do as swiftly as possible, let me get you guys up to date on some stuff. Got some exciting news. There's going to be a big top of the continent Bigfoot expedition going on here in the middle of next month. I have former guests that have been on my show from all over North America showing up for it. Really excited, and you, of course, are going to be along with us because we will be recording everything, showing it on future shows. We're also working in coordination with the Paranormal Portal over on YouTube and all the podcasting platforms and TFR Radio and Revolver Radio Network. They are working with us to try and bring a live broadcast from the first location we're going to be camping and squatching at that weekend, which is a ghost town. And this ghost town, we've had multiple expeditions there before. It's definitely haunted. The locals are terrified of it. They won't camp there. There's all kinds of bad legends and stuff about it. Indian burial ground, old abandoned ghost town, collapsed mine, little people, Bigfoot, ghosts. Yeah, so should be incredibly fun. Hope you guys get a chance to check it out. That, if everything works, will be on Friday, August 7 Pacific time. You can watch the show on Paranormal Portal on YouTube. And hopefully all of the technical bugs will be worked out and we can make it run. And you guys will be able to catch part of the expedition live from the field as it begins. So don't miss that.
Every time that we've been out researching, we try to go at midnight and stay out till wee hours of the morning, because that's the best time that these things are really active. At least that's what we've concluded. Now, that doesn't mean that's necessarily the case. Another statistic that we're finding is that more and more we're getting encounters and sightings in suburbs. They're coming into towns and cities.
Yeah.
I have a friend down in Louisiana who lives around the Shreveport area, and he informed me that on two different occasions, one night he heard one screaming just north in the city, and the other one was just to the west of the city. But he says where these yells were coming from were inside the city limits. So what's going on now is pretty interesting. It's an interesting concept to throw into this, because it could be that the population is growing so fast that they're looking for other sources of food. There's a number of things that it could be. We just don't know. And the important thing is to find out enough about these things to know what to expect when we go out there.
Yeah, and what they're up to. And you're right, because you hear reports from one of the creepiest ones I heard was somebody it got up early in the morning. They were on their way to work. It was, twilight. The sun was just starting to come up and wasn't completely light yet. But you could see color and everything. There was that much sun. And he was driving through this neighborhood that was pretty well deserted. There's hardly any of the houses had anybody living in it anymore. Most of them were abandoned tenements. And there was a Bigfoot crawling out of the window of one of them. And this was in Detroit.
Wow. That's amazing. I investigated a report from a city that's kind of northeast of me. A lady contacted me. She said that she wanted me and my team to come out to her house, and she wanted to show us what she's experienced and some of the things that she's encountered. Well, the team and I went up there, and we spent 2 days there. And she definitely has activity. But the most amazing thing about her activity around her house is she's got houses all around her. I mean, everywhere around her. But we noticed that about 100 yards from her house is a creek. And the creek actually goes to a river that's just north of her. And we think that these things are coming up the creeks.
Yeah, that's her travel route.
Yep. That's how they're getting into populated areas. But she had, and this is another 23-inch track that I've seen here in Oklahoma. She had 23-inch tracks in her backyard.
Good God.
Which is amazing to me. And we found greasy handprints on our dumpsters, big, huge handprints on our dumpsters. There was even one on the window of her house, as maybe he was peeking in the window or whatever. And she had a neighbor that was on the other side of the creek that's kind of catty corner to her, and he raised goats. And this guy lost 25 goats, just disappeared, vanished.
Wow.
And the authorities came out and told the guy that there was a pack of wild dogs roaming around, and that's what took his goats. Well, okay, whatever. But, and I think that's just them throwing a hypothesis at the guy, saying this is actually what took place. And, and I know that's not what actually took place.
Nope.
When we were investigating her house, I actually found out in the woods 2 dog carcasses. So, it's just really strange how all that kind of fits together. And we actually went out to the river, which was a couple miles from our house, and kind of walked the sandbanks. And we saw impressions in the sand. They weren't definitive, but there had been something or somebody walking down the river. So it leads credence to some of the investigation reports that we've done in that area. And plus, she told us, she said, I just want to get rid of these things. They've been here for 4 years. And she goes, every time I plant a garden, my garden gets taken. She told me, she said that last year, I think she grew squash and a bunch of other things, but she only got 1 squash off her squash plants. 1. The rest of them were taken from her garden. And she had a garlic patch up next to her house. And she said every clove of garlic that showed up ended up missing. She's found tracks in her garden and in her flower bed and stuff like that. So she's definitely, they definitely know where she is and how to get some grub. So.
Naughty Squatch, though, they're stealing all of her food all the time now. The story with the goats reminds me of another friend of mine that's been on the show repeatedly, and he's in a new location, living in another state now, and he's the farm that he's living on has goats. They've got these little bitty goats there, and there's also a Bigfoot there. And the Bigfoot apparently like watching the goats. They never take any of them. Apparently, they find the goats to be intensely entertaining. And they just like to watch them. And now where he's living, his back porch is kind of looking right at where the goat pen is. So they're like watching him when he's sitting out there at night and stuff now too. Right. So he was having problems initially when he moved there with other predators. There was a bobcat around the area, and he knows what they are and everything. And he just loudly announced, "Hey, don't do anything with the goats, but if you see that bobcat around here, get rid of them." And he doesn't know if they've actually done anything or not, but he hasn't seen any sign of the bobcat since then. So he's kind of leaning toward maybe they did get rid of the thing because it sure hasn't been around. And the other thing that was funny is that the whole area around this goat pen is all mowed. It's yard. It's got trees in it, but it's all mowed. It's actually yard. It's not woods or anything. And they can't get quite close enough to where they want to be apparently and still be under cover. So they made a blind there. And by blind, I mean they ripped a 35-foot tree out somewhere else, drug it in, and just dropped it there and kind of left it on the yard. The mowed part of the yard. It's like, a 35-foot tree just appearing in the middle of the night. Not suspicious at all. No.
Yeah, no, not at all.
And it's still got the roots on it and everything because they clearly tore it out of the ground and moved it from somewhere else, So.
Well, I do think that they have a sense of humor. The reason I say that, Duke, is in this one area up in northwest Oklahoma where we found the 23-inch track with all the baby tracks, we think that guy is the alpha of the troop.
Good God, if he isn't, I don't want to meet the one that's bigger than him.
Right. Of course, you know the formula that you can use to where you can compare their tracks with human tracks, and we've actually estimated this guy to be probably close to 10 foot. and probably weighs anywhere between 12 and 1,400 pounds. He's a big guy. Well, we think we've seen him a couple times. There's a part of the trail that we go down, and there's a cedar tree that's probably about 9 foot, and it's big and bushy and everything. But there's been several occasions when we look over there, and we see this dark silhouette standing behind this tree. And if it's him, only about a head and part of his shoulders is over the top of the tree when he's standing behind the tree. So he's very visible if he doesn't kneel down. Well, this guy, we think he's played some tricks on us before. I was walking with one of my researchers and then a guy from work who doesn't believe, and he wanted to go out with us just to see what we experience and what we do. And so we took him out to this area where all this takes place, and the wood structures and stuff. And of course, we're walking along trails. I'm leading the pack, and we're showing him wood structures that we have found. And he'll look at it and go, "Well, that ain't nothing but flood damage." And I turn around and say, "Dude, there hadn't been a flood here in over 100 years. What are you talking about?" And so as we're walking along, all of a sudden this horse apple comes flying through the air and hits a tree over the top of my head, and the horse apple lands at my feet. For those of you who don't know what a horse apple is, it's a seed pod of a bodark tree. It's also called Osage orange, I believe. And anyway,
not to be confused with a road apple.
Right. And so this horse apple lands at my feet, and I reach down, I pick it up and turn it over, and there's a great big bite mark taken out of the horse apple. I turned around to the guy behind me and I said, "See this?" And he goes, "Yeah, I can't explain that." So I don't know. I don't know if he's kind of leaning toward believing what he saw or what he experienced or not. But the thing is, when I was growing up, we had horse apples in our country, and my parents and my grandparents always told me, "Don't mess with those. They're poisonous. Leave them alone." Some people in the South use them, and they'll pick them up with gloves or something, and they'll put them in their closet because supposedly it's a really good insect repellent. It repels the insects and spiders and all that kind of stuff. So seeing a bite mark out of this horse apple, it may not be poisonous to them, but they also may take a chunk out of it to get the juices going from the horse apple itself and rub it on them as an insect repellent. True. Don't know if that's true, but I'm saying it is possible.
Well, there's a reason to believe they might be doing the same sort of thing with wild garlic and skunk cabbage and things like that too.
Right. And one thing we noticed, Oklahoma is known for, we have our snakes and all that kind of stuff. And one thing we've noticed, if we go into an area that Bigfoot is there, Squatches are there, one thing we noticed, there's no snakes. None. You don't ever see a snake. You can walk for miles and never see a snake.
You know what a snake is to a Bigfoot? That's a non-processed Jack Link's beef jerky stick.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But, we've been to places where you would just think that you were going to run into some kind of snake and never do, which is really weird because you could go in other areas in the state, where there's not really Bigfoot related stuff going on, and you can find snakes all over the place. So I don't know if they have something to do with the snakes or it's just kind of weird.
It wouldn't surprise me at all that they'd be eating them because, for something like that, wow, there's an easy food source, and it's all meat.
Mm-hmm.
Tear the head off and eat the rest of it, pretty much. Peel it. But, it's the same sort of thing that we've noted up here in areas that have high Bigfoot activity. You may find game animals and stuff around, but you won't find any predators around there. There's not going to be any mountain lions or any timber wolves or any grizzly bears in the same area where there's a lot of Bigfoot activity because they're not suicidal.
Well, I don't know if your area is like my area here, but we're finding more and more signs of Dogman activity, which at the very beginning of this, when I got into this, I wasn't really in tune to that thing at all and didn't know anything about it, didn't really want to know anything about it. And it seems like the population here, at least in the state of Oklahoma, is growing because we're getting sightings and encounters of Dogman. Had an oil field guy tell us one time that he saw a female werewolf while he was working at night, and of course everybody but us kind of laughed at him. But we're more and more people are starting to see these things, and I don't know if it's some kind of Bigfoot off species. A lot of people say they are, but what we do know, or what we've experienced, is Bigfoot and Dogman do not habitat the same area. It's different.
Yeah.
And I had a Native American elder tell me one time, he said, if you run across Bigfoot, just leave it alone. Don't mess with it. He said, if you don't mess with them, they're not going to mess with you. But he says, if you run across what you guys are calling the Dogman, he said, shoot it to kill it because it's evil. So it kind of makes me think, I think a lot of these Native American people have a lot of wisdom and knowledge of all this stuff. And I think at first they might have talked about that stuff, but more and more times than not now, they've shied away from giving this information. It's real hard to get information from Native Americans, and I think it's because they've been ridiculed and laughed at for so long that they don't want to talk about this stuff.
Yep.
But if you spend some time with them, and they understand what you're trying to do, like my group and what we do, they understand that, hey, we're not actually out there to make fun of them. We're out there looking for some of the things that they describe.
Right. And I agree with you. I actually have three people showing up here for the top of the continent expedition that are from 3 different native tribes representing, including Navajo. And, it's interesting what you were saying about, they'll tell you if you see a Bigfoot or something like that, no big deal, don't worry about it that much. But if you see a Dogman, shoot it, it's evil. We get the same sort of warning up here, except just insert little people instead of Dogman. Yeah. And they don't say shoot it, they say leave the area immediately.
Right. And I've heard those same stories. The reservation here, there's been quite a few sightings of little people, and I've heard the same kind of information saying, get out of there because they're worse than anything that's out there.
Right. In some areas there, it depends on what your local little people are like. Apparently there's more than one kind of those things, and I defer to Robin Moonshadow on expertise on that one. But in the area we're in, we have the Narumbi over here, and the Narumbi are notoriously allies of the Crow. And at one time, the Sioux were raiding into Crow territory and wiping out some Crow villages, and ended up being there overnight. And the Narumbi came out and killed 239 of the 250 Braves that were there.
Oh, wow.
And that's why they quit raiding into Crow territory. So, yeah, like the word sort of got around, you don't mess with these little guys because you'll be really dead. Yeah,
that kind of goes with the territory, I think. I mean, that is something you don't want to mess with, according to what they say. And I've never experienced anything like that, but I've talked to many people up there on the reservation that have seen them, have experienced them. And, one time I even talked to a security guard. They thought there was a kid running around the parking lot, and they took off after this kid because they thought this kid was lost or something. Well, this thing was running from them, and they even said this thing was dressed in like leather or something. Mm. And he told me, he said this thing would run a little ways and look back at them and just laugh. And he said this thing was so quick, he said there was no way we could catch this thing. And at one time it ended up on top of the roof of a trailer that's there, and he looked down at him and was laughing at him because they couldn't catch him. Mm-hmm. So you hear those kind of stories. I can't vouch for that, but I do trust a Native American security officer from the reservation that tells me what he saw. I do think that what he told me was true, and there's no doubt.
I'll tell you, I feel the same way. It's, easy enough to pass off reports of other things that you haven't seen, and I've seen this, but I don't believe in this. But when I was doing Bigfoot research at this one ghost town that we're going to be at, that I talked about at the beginning of the show, the locals will all tell you that the little people live on top of that mountain, not just there, but the other ghost town that's on the other side of the top of the mountain. And the owner that owns that other ghost town says that they're there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm walking around looking for Bigfoot tracks, and guess what I find? Little person tracks. 3 of them,
wow.
just about the size of a toddler's tracks, and with moccasins.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, okay, I'm leaving the area now.
Well, I have a lot of credence and belief in a lot of the Native American stories and legends, and I do believe that they know more about these things than we could ever know, and it's been documented in their history, and it's been documented in their culture, and it's important to find somebody that you can actually talk to that knows the culture, knows the history, knows the heritage, because those guys are a plethora of information if you just go up and talk to them and try to show them that what you're doing and what you're saying is legit stuff. So,
well, let me address what you were talking about before with the Dogman thing. First of all, since I've been up in this area here in Montana for about 10 years now, I have not heard of one single Dogman report. I do have 5 mountain giant reports, but 0 reports. Is the reason that I'm not getting the other? You guys can decide that. Yeah, we just don't get any of that. The other thing is that Dogman is getting confused with a bunch of other things. First of all, you talk about the natives and that they know about what's actually going on here, whether that we want to believe it or can get them to tell us about it or not. There are certain things that are culturally taboo because they're borderline so dangerous on the paranormal side that if you reference it or say its name, it can call it, it could show up, it could kill you. So they just won't literally talk about some of these things with anybody, even their own tribe members. So it's not just because we're white men. And a good example of that is skinwalkers. And let me refer you guys to a show recently done with the Navajo Rangers, and not some stupid Bigfoot researchers like us. These are the actual rangers that are protecting the Navajo Nation, and they got a section in there where they're talking about skinwalkers and incidents that they've had to deal with and what to do and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, they're real as far as these guys are concerned. These are law enforcement. Skinwalkers are real. So you see something that looks like a dogman, A, could be a skinwalker. B, could be an actual dogman. There's all kinds of stories about dogman going back thousands of years, including the cynocephaly over in the Middle East and all that sort of thing, dog-headed man, St. Christopher, blah, 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 goes way, way, way back. Werewolf tales coming out of Wallachia and, the whole Carpathian Mountains having werewolves, and that's real. So this sort of stuff is all over the world and has been going on for a long time. So it's not recent. And the third thing is that there's a sub-variety of Bigfoot that people mistake for Dogman. It's a type 3, Gugwee, Tugawee, face eater. Up in Canada, they call it the bear man. It looks like a Bigfoot, except it's got a snout on it. A good example of an eyewitness up here in Ontario that sent me the report, that what he described is he said it looked like an ape-like body, or a body like Patty, the Bigfoot from the PG film, but just slap a bear's head on top of it. And this is what people are reporting. An obvious way to tell that it's not a dogman is because it hasn't got the back legs of a canid. It's got human or ape-like legs, and it doesn't have a tail, but it's got a snout on it like a baboon. So some of these are being misreported as dogman. So really, you've got 3 cryptid wild cards that anybody that doesn't know exactly what they're looking at could misreport as one or the other.
Sure, absolutely, I agree with that. The sightings and reports that I'm hearing from around Oklahoma is they do have the legs of a canine, which
that's a real dog, man. And see, we don't get reports of that up here. I've got 2 or 3 Where when you get enough details on them, it's like, no, this is the bear man. It's a type 3 is what you're talking about. I have not gotten one actually good sighting of Dogman where it was like for sure a Dogman with the tail and the whole thing. No, none up here.
Well, I have a researcher on my team, and he works in the oil field. Almost every one of my guys works in the oil field, obviously because Oklahoma is the biggest natural gas and oil field in the world right now. But the thing about it is he goes all over the state of Oklahoma traveling, doing work in the oil field, and he's told me a story that he was driving by himself where he actually saw 5 of them standing in a field. One of them was running toward the highway where he was driving, and he said it was within 100 yards of him, and it jumped, or not even really jumped. I guess it leaped and hopped over the 5-foot barbed wire fence, jumped one time on the highway, and then jumped across the other barbed wire fence, 5-foot fence on the other side. And he told me, he said, Chuck, this thing was moving on. He said, there's no way a deer could get away from this thing. He said it was about the size of a small cow. He said the shoulders were probably 3 to 4 foot wide. And he says the upper body was bigger than the back part of the body. And when he saw that one, he looked over where it came from, and there was 4 more standing over there following the other one. So, I mean, I would vouch for this guy with my life. I mean, he's on my team, and, there's some strange things happening all over the place, I think. And some of the stuff is starting to come out that people never really even noticed or even thought of noticing. So,
well, there's some people that think the veil is thinning right now, which, of course, actually that's biblical. It does say that's supposed to happen in the end times if you give credibility to the Bible and or that it's the end times. The other interesting thing is that from a scientific aspect, we know that there is a human resonance frequency, SCHUMAN, resonance frequency to the Earth and everything else, and that the Earth's human resonance frequency is actually changing. So what does that mean exactly? Well, it could mean that the human resonance frequency of the Earth is what keeps us on this Earth plane that we perceive. And if you change the resonance frequency very much, we start drifting into another Earth plane. Just like if you're on a radio dial and you're listening to one channel and then you turn the dial a little bit, and it goes to another channel, and there's that static in between. But sometimes when you're out in the middle of nowhere, those channels kind of drift together almost, which could be what's happening here, that the human resonance frequency is shifting enough that it's bringing us a lot closer to one of these other frequencies, so the things in that other frequency can get through into our frequency a lot more easily.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I have the opinion, Duke, that there's going to be more and more sightings and more encounters, not just of Bigfoot, but of all these other cryptids that are out there. And I don't really subscribe to a lot of these other cryptids. I mean, it's not to say I don't believe, but I just wonder if people are seeing something else than what they're saying they're seeing. But on the other hand, like you were talking about, I think we're coming to a time and a place in man's history where there's going to be a lot more things happening than what's happened before. And also, I believe that the population of the Bigfoot species is growing astronomically because we find baby tracks all the time. And so they are reproducing at a steady rate. And I think there's a possibility that the Dogman are bouncing back too and doing the same thing. So,
yeah, it's interesting. There's a bunch of theories on that one. One of them is that since it's known to be extremely likely, at least, that Bigfoot are probably also subterranean. They can live in caves. They can see in the dark really good. Why wouldn't they go there? Lava tubes that they can use for moving around and all that sort of stuff. Well, what if there's just like something going on underneath the ground and there's a bunch more of them coming to the surface all of a sudden? And, this kind of matches up with some of the guys over there that are talking about the underground UFO bases, the reptoids underground, the giants living underground. Well, maybe they're Bigfoot or some of their workers and stuff. Steve Quayle and those guys talking about the giants returning, talking to natives over in the Southwest, saying that they're actually in communication via a portal with the giants, and the giants on the other side are telling them that they're going to be coming back soon. Is all of this connected? Well, we don't know, but we'll just keep bringing you shows and talking about it as we get more information.
That's exactly right. It's what we do.
So, yeah, but it's interesting to think about, there are other possibilities too. Just from a hard hands-on physics standpoint, there are more deer in North America now than there have ever been in recorded history. There is more crops and more food supplies in North America than there's ever been in recorded history. Simultaneously, there's been more of a move to the cities and away from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle, and fewer people are hunting. So there's more and more food available for these guys and less people out there getting in the way. And down in the south where you're at, you've got the non-indigenous hog problem too, which is like bonanza woohoo free bacon for Bigfoot. They love that.
Right. And I even saw a report on the news the other day where there's a guy here in Oklahoma that's trying to implement warthogs from Africa into Oklahoma. And we're like, are you freaking kidding me?
What the age for?
I don't know. I have no idea. And why he's wanting to do that. I guess because they're bigger and he can make more money off of, catching hogs that size or what. I have no idea. It's just crazy thinking, I think. The ones we have now are just as, bad enough. We don't need to
upgrade them. Yeah, super death pigs. Oh, regular death pigs aren't bad enough. Let's get super death boonie pigs now.
Yeah. So I'm hoping the state will block him from ever making that happen. So
yeah, if they got any sanity, they will. Go look at what the feral pigs have done in other states and how much damage and money they cost every year. It's ridiculous.
It is.
They're right-minded about those things loose, and we're about to have I shouldn't say that. We're almost probably not going to have a problem with them because there's some Russian boars that have gotten loose above the border here in Canada. But he's all, oh my God, they might come down into Montana. No, dude, we have plenty of hungry grizzlies here. They're not going to be in Montana.
Well, yeah, it's the food sources are here in the States for sure. We've got, like I said earlier in the program, we have tons of wheat here, and we have the wild hog population, got the deer population, and lots of rivers, streams, creeks, lakes, ponds. So we also have a big fish population here too as well. And there's one area that I've investigated where this lake up toward western Oklahoma has shellfish in it, clams, freshwater clams. And you will go back into the woods and you will find piles of clams there and I know raccoons can do this, but there is Bigfoot in this area, and I think that they're actually harvesting the freshwater clams out of the lake. And so food is not a problem here in the state at all.
Yeah. Same thing here. They're just limitless amounts of food here. It's ridiculous. I went for a walk with one of my local part-time team member. He's actually the son of the local head of forestry here. So this kid grows up, knows everything about this area, every animal, all the plants. We're walking up this trail for about a mile. And I said, hey, every time you see something edible to humans, point it out to me. And by the time we got up to the end of that mile, he had like enough food to almost fill a small bucket. And he had never stepped off the trail.
Wow. That's amazing. We have like wild onions that grow around here. We have sand plums that grow, and people actually collect the sand plums and make jelly out of them and stuff. And they're real sweet. They're real good. We think that they visit sand plum bushes quite a bit and pick the plums off. And the food shortage, as I said, is it can supply enough food for creatures this size, and I think that's exactly what takes place. The amazing part about Oklahoma, and you and I kind of talked about this before, is most of Oklahoma, I mean, it looks like just flat land in a lot of places, but in this flat land area, there will be great big huge crevices and creeks, and it looks like you're in a different world. And it's hard for me sometimes to go to certain areas and think, well, there's no way a Bigfoot is here. And I'll tell you one example of that. There's a lake that I frequented because I had this lake is a real small lake. It's a bass lake, and it's actually owned by one of the colleges, and the college takes care of it. And I had a guy come to me who went to school there, and he told me that he and his buddies used to go out there at night and fish. And he said after going out there quite a few times, he said, we got run out. And I said, well, what do you mean you got run out of there? He said, well, we had rocks thrown at us, tree branches thrown at us, and yells and screams at us. And he said, we hopped in the truck and got out of there because we didn't, we were scared. And he said, I can also tell you about this other episode where this guy had a Jeep, and on the backside of this lake is a creek. It's heavily wooded and real brushy. And he said, this guy was driving around the backside of the lake and trying to do some mud running. That is kind of a hobby here in the state of Oklahoma. And so he drove his Jeep through the creek, and his Jeep got stuck. So he gets out of his Jeep and goes and gets some help from guys in town to help him get his Jeep out. Well, when he goes back out there, his Jeep is turned over into the spring or the creek. And they couldn't explain that. They didn't know how his Jeep got turned over. He wasn't even there. So I went out to that area. I actually took my son with me, and because of these reports that I got, and went out there. And driving up to the place, you would never ever think that Bigfoot was even in this area at all, because it's nothing but open fields. But when I got to the lake itself, the lake was actually in a great big huge ravine, and all around this lake was trees and brush and that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, that's a little bit more interesting than what I saw driving up here. So me and my son got out, and we checked dumpsters and stuff like that, looking for prints. Didn't find anything. And I noticed that in the campground part, there were 2 travel trailers sitting there. The people wasn't there, and I think the travel trailers are actually owned by the school. So there wasn't anybody there at the time. So we walked, I got to looking at this area, and about probably, I'd say 8 or 9 feet behind the travel trailers was a wood line. And I thought, I'm going to go back there and just see if I can see anything, because Bigfoot is curious, so they do watch us. And I walked behind the travel trailer, and lo and behold, there's this great big huge cottonwood tree, and I find a 15-inch track. Wow. And the track is pointed directly at the back of the campers. So wow. He was behind the campers watching whoever was there at one time. And my son hollered at me, said, Dad, come over here. And I went over to where he was, and I found 2 more 15-inch tracks. So it was the same individual, at least I think it was. I had a right track, a left track, and another right track in that area. And man, I praise my son for finding them. He was young and really into what Dad was doing, so he was kind of gung-ho about it. And so I told him, I said, well, let's walk down here by the lake where the bank is and see if we can find any tracks or anything. So we walked down to the lake, and as we're walking toward the lake, down to the bank, off to my right were these weeds that were probably 4 to 5 feet tall, and brush and thickets down through there. And all of a sudden, we hear this rooster crow. And this wasn't really a rooster because it sounded like he weighed about 800 pounds.
Oh man, if it was a rooster though, it would have been so worth getting them.
Yeah, it would have
Imagine
been.
how much fried chicken you could make out of that sucker. You could feed a whole campground.
Yeah. So my, the,
I'm
the cool
sorry,
thing,
man.
no, the cool thing about that experience is my son looked up at me and says, "Dad, that wasn't a rooster, was it?" And I said, "No,
No.
that was no rooster." And the crazy part about that whole incident is there's not any farms around there near the lake. So where this 800-pound rooster came from, I have no idea. But that made me rethink my thinking as far as, there's no way Bigfoot could survive in an area like this when in fact, yeah, he had been there at least once and probably was there while we were there. So, stuff like that happens. We've had some crazy experiences like that. So,
Well, my favorite one like that is where, you hear the bionic bird and you're talking about the bionic chicken. And well, yeah, there's this canyon I like to do research in, Patty Canyon. It's at about 5,000 feet. There isn't any water around there. There isn't any ponds around there. There isn't any rivers. There's really no place other than a few little seeps and tiny little rivulets that you could step over easily, not even big enough to support it. But the short version is there's no frogs around there. So not only me, but one of my other friends who's experienced this repeatedly, being up there around dark, all of a sudden you hear this bionic frog croak. And then and it comes from the other side of the canyon, so it's like really loud. You can hear it going across the canyon. And both of us were like researching every kind of local bird sound and everything we could think of to try and figure out what weird local bird makes this noise. And there isn't one. And then the next time I heard it, I realized it's supposed to be a frog.
Yeah.
It's just way, way, way too loud.
Yeah. That's the way that rooster was, we heard. Yeah, that's crazy.
And he'd do it at intervals. You can almost predict it clockwork. If you're up in this area right around dark where you're not supposed to be right around dark, this sentinel apparently does it. And he'll do it about every 2 or 3 minutes as long as you're there. You'll hear this one lone bionic frog croak.
Wow. That is crazy.
Yeah, I just thought it was the weirdest thing ever. And then I ran randomly into one of my other friends in town here who had been up there in the same place around dark several times. And I started bringing it up, and he goes, "I heard that too. I never could figure out what it was that was doing that." And I'm like, oh, man.
It's a big frog.
Yeah, that was one tremendously. I said, "Did it remind you of a frog croak?" And he said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's what it sounded like, but it was too loud."
Yeah. Well, this hotspot area that we have in northwest Oklahoma that we go to quite a bit, we went up there one night, and we had never been, well, I can't say never. We had been there once before during the night and heard some wood knocks and stuff like that. But this particular night, there was about 6 of us that went in there, and all around where we parked our vehicles to get out, all around us, there was probably what sounded like 8 or 9 owls hooting, and which is totally out of the ordinary for owls because owls are territorial.
Yeah, right. You're not going to have a whole flock of them in one place.
And we all just kind of looked at each other and grinned because we knew what was happening. We knew what was going on. And, you experience some of that stuff, and, you just got to smile because you know that what you're experiencing is not what you perceive to be experiencing.
Well, right. And sometimes their calls are so sloppy. After you hear it, you just go, "What were you even thinking trying to do that?" Like a good example is, owls and crows. They're arch enemies. Crows will never make noise at night because the owls will home in on them and kill them. So they will never make a noise after dark. And vice versa. If the crows figure out where the owls are during the day when they're roosting, the whole murder of crows will come over and harass them the whole day and go after them. So they're like arch enemies. So we're sitting there in the dark, and you hear this noise that goes, "Woo, woo, woo, ah, ah, ah." And you're like, dude, no, wrong.
Yeah. You got the first part wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
And
funny.
I've heard the reverse too, where it starts out sounding like a crow call, and then it goes into an owl, like they realize it's night, and oops, oh, I got to switch over to the other one, and you're like going, what, this happened in the same area. I think it was the same juvenile probably that was being dumb, but it was
Right.
pretty hilarious. We also
Well,
heard somebody up on top of the hill, on top of the mountain, actually tried to make a Bigfoot howl. I don't know if they were watching Finding Bigfoot or whatever, but they made the Bigfoot howl. And I'm sitting down in the blind about 100 yards from where the actual Bigfoot are getting ready to nab some deer. And one of them just made this really low whoop, and the other one made a dull thud against the tree. Like that was their review, and it really sucked, apparently.
yeah, like I said earlier, I do think they have a sense of humor.
Yeah,
And
I cracked up when I heard that. I couldn't contain myself. I busted out laughing out loud, and I'm sure they heard that.
we've had experiences up there in Northwest Oklahoma that I just imagine the big guy back there giggling to himself, because we'll go down a trail, and sometime later we'll come down this trail, and there will be a great big tree branch broken that's laid on top of the trail, and we're like, well, we know that wasn't there before. And so this one particular incident, we were walking back to our vehicles, and as we're walking back to our vehicles, where our vehicles were parked was in a dead area, that it's dead end. And so we were walking back to our vehicles, and as we're walking back toward our vehicles, we see this pickup coming down toward our vehicles, and we're kind of down in the creek, so he can't really see us, but we can see the pickup or whatever. Well, he turns around, he gets down there where our vehicles are, and he turns around and goes out. We think it's probably a hunter or something, that come in there. Well, we decide that we're going to walk down the road a little ways where he'd come in at. Well, on this road is a great big tree branch. And the amazing thing about this tree branch is it's over the top of the guy's tire prints that had just came in there. So
Right.
This guy placed a tree branch or something over the trail that we came in on right after this guy left. And we see that kind of stuff a lot, and we think, yeah, he's just wanting us to know that he's here, and he's probably back there giggling at himself for doing what he did. But yeah, we find some crazy stuff like that.
I had another researcher that was experiencing something similar to that, and he said, we got this good area. It's a long ways to get in there. We got to take ATVs. And then it seems like after we go in there once or twice, they snap trees down over the trail and try to block the trail. And he said, is that a bad sign? And I said, no, actually, the bad sign is when you're in there and they snap the trees down to block the trail so you can't get out.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the bad side.
Well, I have had one bad sign, and I'll tell this real quick story. One of the places that we do go to is a place called Brown Springs. For those of you folks that don't know, there's a river that flows through there called the Red River that separates Texas from Oklahoma. Brown Springs has a notorious history of Bigfoot-related incidents, including the death of a guy and a girl who were actually parking out there back in the 70s. A lot of people say that's true. A lot of people say it's not, but it is part of the legend of the area. And there is a lot of truth in the fact that during the pioneer days, in the early years of statehood, these people would cross the Red River right through there, and in wagons or whatever, coming across. And there were many people that were killed in this area, and they have a cemetery up on top of a hill that has the tombstones. Some of the tombstones up there are so old you can't even. There's no writing. You don't even see the writing on the tablets anymore. It's completely gone. But some of these tombstones are dated like in the 1700s and 1800s and early 1900s. So there was a lot of stuff that happened right in that area. It's kind of got some bad mojo to it, but it is definitely a Bigfoot area. They are there.
What's creepy about that is if you think about people getting killed there, I mean, I don't think what you really mentioned directly is that drowning. They didn't make it across the river all the time. Your wagons got wrecked, people drowned. Their corpses washed downstream. So now there's corpses washing up on the banks downstream, and that's kind of tempting.
Yeah.
for things that want an easy, free meal.
Yeah, exactly. But we go down to this area, and when we go in there, we go into the primitive areas. I mean, that area gets a lot of traffic because there's a lot of people in the South that have heard about Brown Springs and what happened there, supposedly happened there. And so they want to go visit that area. So it gets a lot of traffic. And we go way off the road, way out into the bush. And usually it's right on the river itself. And me and one of my research buddies went down there and spent a couple of days down there. During the night, I have this habit of having to go to the bathroom at night. And so there was this 6-7 inch tree back behind my tent, and I would go back there and I'd pee on that tree, and I'd go back in and go back to sleep. Well, I did that a couple of times during the night, I guess. And the next morning, the guy that was with me woke up with a migraine headache. And so we rushed to town and got him some ibuprofen, ate some breakfast, and then traveled back out to our campsite. Well, when we got to our campsite, that tree had been broken about a foot off the ground, and that tree was almost directly on top of my tent. If it would have shoved it a foot more one direction, it would have collapsed my tent. So obviously, sometime during the night, I must have ticked somebody off because they didn't like me peeing on that tree.
Yeah. Well, maybe he thought you were making a territorial marker, and he wanted to make it really clear that your territory extended to the tent, and that was it.
Yeah, exactly. But we found some really good things down there too. We had found on the south side of the river, on the Texas side, we found what we can only describe as an igloo made out of sticks and brush. Cool. And it had one opening in it. And when we ran across it, we ran across it by accident. I mean, the brush and the thickets in this area are probably 12 to 13 feet tall. And so when you're walking through there, you don't even have a sense of direction. You're surrounded by weeds and stuff. And
yeah, you can't see the sky. You can't go in a straight line. Yeah.
And we just happened to walk up on this thing, and it was right there. And we looked at it and notated it, and then we found one on the Oklahoma side as well. And the one we found on the Oklahoma side was a little bit more interesting. It was actually in what used to be the river channel, and so it was surrounded by sand dunes and everything like that, and it was actually leaned up against a sand dune. I saw it. We were doing an expedition with DDoS. I don't know if you know DDoS.
Oh, sure. I've been on his show.
Okay, so we were with D and D's group and my group. We kind of joined up and went down there, and that's when we started finding this stuff. But this igloo-looking thing, we found another one on, like I said, the Oklahoma side, and it was leaning up against a sandbank. And I saw it. We had split up into two groups. D's group went one way, my group went another way. And I told the guys, I said, hey, I saw it a pretty good ways from it. I said, hey, we got something up here. Let's be real quiet and let's go up there and see what we got. And so I got within 30 yards of it, and I was actually facing the opening of this thing, and it looked like a triangle. And we stopped. I took a knee, and I got out my zoom lens. It was completely dark in there. I mean, you couldn't see anything on the inside, especially at 30 yards. But I zoomed in there, and I couldn't see anything. It was just solid black, and I snapped a picture. Well, when I snapped a picture, my flash flashed because it was so dark, and it lit up two eyes.
Oh, God.
And I thought, oh, crap. And because there again, you're thinking wild hogs, cougar, coyotes, whatever. And one of my guys had a FLIR, and I said, hey, get your FLIR up here. We got something in here. So he puts his FLIR on it, and we see a heat signature laying on the ground with 2 eyes. This thing was probably pretty small. I'm talking juvie small.
Yeah.
And over to the right of us, the woods go crazy. We hear branches breaking. We hear whistles. We hear stomping. And we're like, uh-oh, we're in a place where we shouldn't be. And one thing D does when he goes into the woods is he whistles the same tune every time he goes in there, so they know it's him.
Right.
And so I got a hold of D on the walkie-talkie, and I said, D, you guys need to get over here. We found a structure, and there's something in it, and they're not happy. So D comes over there, makes a beeline over there. We completely surround this structure, so we're on all sides of it, so we can see if something comes out in another area, we can spot it. And as soon as D comes over there, he starts whistling that tune, and immediately, the woods got quiet. And D started walking up toward the opening, and he gets up to the opening, and he says, hey, I think I saw something. And he goes up on top of the sandbank and looks down. When he looks down, he sees whatever this is inside this structure go into the sandbank and covers the hole up that he went into.
Mm-hmm.
And we instantly lose it on the FLIR. It just disappears. So we're sitting there taking in everything that just happened, and we're thinking, okay, was that a baby Bigfoot that jumped into the sandbank? We don't really know. I do know this, that I had another Native American elder tell me one time that the Bigfoot is a brother of the beaver. So it would make sense to me if it was a juvenile, if he went into the sandbank and covered the hoe up as he went in. A lot of interesting things.
And it's not the first report that we've heard of that on this show either. We've heard reports of that before too. Them just burrowing into sandbanks and camp out. Apparently they've got a cave in there or something. I don't know, but burrow in, the entrance collapses, covered with sand, and they're just in there. What the hell? I don't know.
Right.
Strange stuff. Knights are heroes of the realm by going to paypal.me/World Bigfoot Central and making whatever you can afford for a donation. We are exclusively run on your donations, and they are all greatly appreciated. And also, like I mentioned at the top of the show, which probably was the previous show, you guys, if you have an encounter that went really badly, something really weird happened, you're really scared, you're all shaken up, your world's turned upside down, I now have a person in addition to me that can help field calls like that, Deb, who would be happy to talk to you and get your story. And again, if it's something you need my help with, you can also mention that right in the comment, and I'll go directly to you. But everybody, thanks for being here for the show. Looking forward to some more really great shows coming up here soon. And thanks again to Chuck for being on the show. And all the rest of you folks out there, you know the drill. So make sure that you're kind to everyone. Safety first, last, and always. Pay it forward. Don't be mean to people if you don't have to be. Don't flip off the mountain giant. Don't poke Dogman with a stick. Don't punt the puck, would you? And for God's sake, whatever you do not hug the Wookiee.